Wei Yao and I, my husband from my past life, have both been reborn. In this life, he deliberately avoids every encounter with me. It all stems from the previous life, when Wei Yao happened to rescue me from bandits. To protect my honor, my father petitioned the emperor for an imperial decree sanctioning our marriage. Thus, he missed his true love, forced to watch her marry the emperor instead. This lifetime, Wei Yao watched helplessly as bandits dragged me into the stable, yet chose to stand by and do nothing. Instead, he seized the imperial decree left for him by the late emperor and beat the emperor to the punch in claiming his true love. The next day, upon hearing news of my bandit attack, my father, just as in the previous life, leveraged his military merits to secure an imperial decree for me to marry the emperor. Wei Yao, upon hearing this, shot me a look dripping with scorn. "You've gone to great lengths to marry this prince. Since that's the case, I'll show mercy and take you as a concubine." I smiled and shook my head, walking away without looking back. Wei Yao didn't know that this time, the man I married wasn't him. He also didn't know that without that imperial decree left by the holy ancestor, he would never be able to protect himself again. As the bandit leader dragged me by my hair toward the stables, I caught sight of Wei Yao deliberately hiding behind a tree. I knew then he had reincarnated too. My fingernails dug deep into the wooden door as I struggled desperately against the bandit's grip. But it only earned me a brutal beating. Blood spilled from the corner of my mouth, my clothes torn to shreds. Watching me reduced to this pitiful state, Wei Yao remained utterly motionless behind the tree. Only his fingers, which had been hanging limply, clenched into a fist. I closed my eyes in despair, a wave of profound sorrow washing over me. Scenes from my past life, years of marriage to him, played back in my mind. I had always believed that even if he didn't love me, at least after over a decade of marital ties in that life, he wouldn't stand by and watch me die. Yet I never imagined that in this life, Wei Yao would rather watch me be defiled by bandits than risk any connection to me. Moments later, the bandit dragged me by both legs into the stable. Before my vision faded, I saw Wei Yao take a hesitant step forward. After that, no further action followed. As the bandit pinned me beneath him, I drew the hairpin from behind my ear and thrust it precisely into his throat. As crimson blood suddenly spurted onto my face, my eyelashes fluttered slightly. When I lifted my gaze again, my eyes were cold and stern, and I tightened my grip on the hairpin. My chest was stained with blood. Clutching the bloodied hairpin, I walked step by step toward Wei Yao. Our eyes locked. Shock made his pupils contract sharply. I halted before him. Clink, the silver hairpin fell to the ground with a crisp sound. A few drops of blood splattered onto his black boots. I lifted my blood-stained face, staring at him unblinkingly for a moment before slowly curving my lips. Contempt, disdain, or perhaps mockery. "Wei Yao, did you see clearly? With or without you, I can still save myself." That day, I narrowly escaped the bandits' clutches. Yet rumors of my encounter spread like wildfire through the capital, soon swirling like sand in the wind. Worse still, whispers claimed I'd been defiled by those outlaws, my virtue lost. Upon hearing this, father rode back from the frontier at night, bringing me into the palace. Just as in my past life, he used his military merits to secure an imperial decree for me and the emperor. Incense curled softly within the chamber, lamplight warm and soft, a small stove bubbling with the sizzle of boiling tea. I lowered my eyes, kneeling upon the floor. This humble maiden refuses to marry the Prince of Duan. The emperor paused, his hand resting on his sandalwood rosary beads, and looked at me with keen interest. "Do you know that your betrothal to Prince Duan was secured by your father, who traded his military merits for it just now? Now that you are plagued by slanderous rumors, if the general's household were to form an alliance with the Prince of Duan's household, a union of imperial blood and supreme honor, no one would dare to speak ill of you again." I slowly raised my head. The Prince of Duan used an imperial edict bearing the great ancestor's seal, to petition His Majesty for the hand of the daughter of a sixth-rank Secretary of State. The entire capital knows of this. This shows the prince's genuine affection for her. I, Yao, refuse to intrude. To marry a husband who does not love me, to spend half my life in torment. Is that all? That is all. Then who is it you wish to marry? Shao say. The emperor raised his eyes in surprise. Who is this? I pressed my lips together lightly, an indifferent yet strikingly handsome face involuntarily appearing in my mind. Then I spoke with unwavering resolve, a guard from the general's residence. The emperor choked on his tea in shock. Nonsense. Your father is, after all, the third-rank dragon guard general personally appointed by this emperor. How can you, his only daughter, marry a mere guard on a whim? How am I to explain this to your father? I bowed low once more. I shall explain everything to my father. This is my sole wish, your majesty. I beg your indulgence. He stood with hands clasped behind his back, turning away, yet a slow smile touched his lips. After a moment, he waved his hand toward me. Very well. Your wish shall be granted. In due time, I shall issue an imperial decree personally sanctioning your marriage, silencing those who speak ill of you. But with the numerous sacrificial rites these days, you must wait a few more days. My heart stirred, and I lowered my lashes slightly. Thank you, your majesty. The Prince of Duan's recent high-profile actions had long displeased the emperor. Father, meanwhile, held immense power. It seemed the emperor truly did not wish to see the general's household and the Prince of Duan's household united in marriage. In my previous life, father had not been unaware of the emperor's true intentions. Yet, to fulfill my wishes, he willingly waded into this murky situation, causing the emperor to suspect him of harboring disloyal ambitions. Therefore, in this life, I would ensure father withdrew completely. After leaving Xianying Palace, I had barely taken a few steps when I collided head-on with Wei Yao. As our eyes met, a flash of disgust flickered in his gaze. Qin Shuan, word spread throughout the capital yesterday that your father rode back to the capital at full gallop to petition the emperor for your hand in marriage. He gritted his teeth, his expression one of utter exasperation. Have you no sense of shame? To go to such lengths, so desperate to marry this prince? A bitter wind swept through, like a blade, slashing down over my head. The man before me wore a deep purple official robe, his face like jade. He was exactly as I remembered from my previous life. Suppressing the metallic taste of blood rising in my throat, I met his almost lifeless gaze and spoke slowly. Your Highness, rest assured. The one Shi Yao marries is not you. Wei Yao laughed in disbelief, almost angered by the absurdity. Still stubborn. The entire capital now whispers of your loss of virtue. Since ancient times, a woman's honor is paramount. If you refuse to marry me, the venom of gossip alone could drown you. The scorn in his eyes was unmistakable. I furrowed my brows, imperceptibly pulling away from him. His voice turned icy. I am not entirely heartless. Considering how eager you are to marry me, taking you as a concubine might be acceptable. Wei Yao pressed forward another step, his eyes flashing a warning. But the position of primary wife belongs solely to Qing'er. Don't even dream of it. I thrust out a palm, shoving him away forcefully, my face hardening as I spoke. Caught off guard, Wei Yao staggered before regaining his balance. Qin Xiuan, you. I lowered my gaze to my toes, cutting him off coldly. Back then, to distance yourself from me, you stood by and watched as I faced calamity. Now, to marry your beloved, you've even resorted to using the blank imperial edict left by the holy ancestor. The difference in your attitudes is as vast as heaven and earth, the entire capital knows it. Shi Yao is not one to demean herself or rush to be humiliated by His Highness the Prince of Duan. Now, your Highness stands on the brink of marriage. I slowly lifted my head, meeting his eyes, dark as ink, and spoke each word deliberately. Shi Yao, congratulations to your Highness. Your wish has been granted. This lifetime, I will never marry you again. Seizing the moment of his stunned silence, I lifted my foot and walked straight past him. Moments later, his piercing shout echoed behind me. Qin Xiuan, you had better keep your word. A mocking curve lifted my lips as I continued walking forward without a backward glance. Wei Yao didn't know that in this lifetime, having both been reborn, I would never repeat the same mistakes. In the previous life, I had been married to him for several years. I rose earlier than the roosters and slept later than the dogs. Not only did I painstakingly manage every detail of the household, but I also attended to his every need with meticulous care. Nothing was overlooked, nothing was neglected. In the 3rd year of our marriage, I gave birth to a son. I hoped this might draw his heart closer to us. Yet his indifference toward me remained unchanged. Even an extra word seemed to irritate him. Instead, he frequented the palace with relentless zeal, as if eager to proclaim to all that he favored the emperor's consort. Later, the woman in the palace fell ill from worrying about him and passed away young. The next day, when I pushed open Wei Yao's door, I found he had already drunk poison wine. He abandoned us, a widow and her orphaned child, to follow his beloved. At that moment, I gazed at the square courtyard walls of the mansion. They felt like a massive boulder crushing my heart. After that, I saw only the cold moon and warm sun, slowly consuming my life. Later, chaos engulfed the land, and the royal house fell into ruin. While fleeing with my child, we were brutally slaughtered by bandits heading north. At the hour of evening, before dawn, a dim light broke through the clouds, and snow began to fall again. When I awoke, my forehead was covered in a fine sheen of sweat. I had dreamt again of my obedient child from my past life, who met such a tragic end. His name was Jianin. I had wished for him a lifetime of health and safety. Yet I never imagined he would die so horribly. Tears welled in my eyes as I wept silently, instinctively placing my hand over my belly. Thankfully, in this life, you won't have to suffer alongside your mother. I found a secluded spot and erected a small stone marker for Qian. Amidst the stillness of all things, I could no longer contain my grief. Clutching the tiny tombstone, I wept until my heart ached. A cold wind swept through, stirring the footprints on the ground before the fine snow could cover them. A solitary trail stretched out, vanishing into the indistinct distance. As dawn broke, I returned to the manor. Catching sight of the dark silhouette in the tree, my heart stirred, and I instinctively called out, "Xiao Sei." After a long moment, there was still no response. Rolling my eyes, I pondered briefly before stepping onto the frozen ground. Feigning a slip, I let out a cry and leaned backward. As expected, I landed securely in someone's arms. A faint scent of ebony incense tickled my nose. Slowly opening my eyes, I met Xiao Sei's tea-colored pupils. A triumphant smirk curved my lips, mischief dancing in my eyes. His gaze was lowered, the storm clouds parting to reveal a moment of clarity in his pupils. But before I could decipher the flicker in his eyes, he straightened my waist. Xiao Sei gave me a lazy glance. Childish. Seeing him turn to leave, I hurriedly grabbed his hand. "Xiao Sei." His body halted. Turning back to see me holding his hand, he raised an eyebrow. "A lady who is to marry His Highness the Prince of Duan shouldn't be so reckless." I froze for a moment, then instantly understood why he was sulking. So he too had thought I would marry Wei Yao, and felt jealous. Sweetness overflowed in my heart. I stubbornly held onto his hand, refusing to let go. He seemed to sense my grip. Xiao Sei's breath caught. He leaned closer, the depths of his eyes darkening instantly. When he fixed his gaze on someone, the corners of his eyes sharpened, his pupils as inky as ink. It felt like being stared at by a young, untamed beast. My heart pounded wildly, and I swallowed hard. "Miss, are you aware of what you're doing? If you keep holding on like this, rumors will spread throughout the capital tomorrow about the general's daughter and a young guard being. Well, you know." I shrugged indifferently, raising an eyebrow. My reputation's already ruined. What's one more scandal? Xiao Sei closed his eyes, sucked his cheeks in an exasperated huff, and finally flung my hand away, striding forward. Watching his puffed-up expression, I couldn't help but laugh. Finally, I uttered the words he most wanted to hear. "Xiao Sei, I won't marry anyone else." True to form, he halted abruptly, turning back in disbelief. His thick lashes trembled with nervousness, yet he forced himself to calm down, his voice low. "Then who will you marry?" To surprise him, I deliberately teased him. "Whoever treats me well, that's who I'll marry." 3 days later, the palace hosted a plum blossom banquet. Both Wei Yao and I were on the guest list. As the daughter of a 6th-rank official, Lin Yuqing was not originally qualified to attend. But Wei Yao brought her in. At the banquet, Lin Yuqing and I sat side by side. She raised her cup to me first. My marriage to the prince wouldn't have been possible without Sister Xiwan's help. Otherwise, as the daughter of a mere 6th-rank official, I'd never have been considered for the crown prince's marriage. Catching the fleeting challenge in her eyes, I replied indifferently, "Then congratulations, Miss Lin." I didn't spare her another glance. Seeing my lack of the reaction she'd anticipated, Lin Yuqing gritted her teeth in anger. During the plum blossom viewing excursion, as our group walked along the lakeside toward Chifeng Forest, she spotted me lagging behind alone. Approaching with a hostile expression, she snapped, "Chen Xiuan, you're only better off because you were born into a more prestigious family. What gives you the right to always look down on me?" I couldn't be bothered with her, striding past her without a second glance. My reply came light as a feather. "Then go die now. Maybe you'll get a better rebirth." Little did I know, just a few steps later, a shattering sound echoed across the lake. Lin Yuqing stood on the frozen surface, stomping down hard with her foot. The recent warming weather had weakened the ice, and after a few steps, she fell through. Finally achieving her wish, she plunged into the hole she created and began screaming for help, instantly drawing a crowd. Wei Yao, in particular, arrived just in time. Seeing Lin Yuqing flailing in the icy water, he hesitated not a moment. He ordered men to break the ice along the shore with shovels and then leaped in himself. Finally, he carried Lin Yuqing ashore, who appeared to be barely clinging to life. Weakly leaning against his chest, Lin Yuqing coughed up a large mouthful of water and stammered, "Your Highness, please don't blame Sister Shiyao. She didn't push me on purpose." Wei Yao looked heartbroken, not even noticing his own soaking wet state. He hurriedly ordered someone to fetch a fox-fur cloak to drape over her. He turned to glare at me with a dark expression. I knew what he was going to say. I spoke first. "She jumped herself. It has nothing to do with me." Wei Yao's face was terrifying, as if he wanted to grind my bones to dust and scatter them to the winds. Glaring at me, he ground out through clenched teeth, "Chen Xiuan, you jealous harlot. Don't think I don't know, you covet Qing'er's position as legitimate wife and sought to kill her." His rage made me laugh bitterly. Forget whether she's the legitimate wife or not. Even if she died tomorrow, it wouldn't concern me. Smack, a resounding slap echoed through the courtyard, silencing it so completely a pin dropping could be heard. The force of the blow knocked my head to the side. Darkness swirled before my eyes, and a trickle of blood seeped from the corner of my mouth. I turned to face him, eyes red and stinging. Tears spilled uncontrollably down my cheeks. Wei Yao froze for a moment. He set Lin Yuqing down, took a step toward me, and reached out his hand. I didn't mean to. I dodged his outstretched hand and growled, "Don't touch me." Wei Yao's hand froze midair, his expression darkening. "Chen Xiuan, you were the one who pushed Qing'er into the water first. My slap was just punishment for your crime." I wiped the blood from my lips with a sneer. "Wei Yao, you fool. How did you ever become ruler of this land?" I spoke coldly, meeting his furious gaze. "The weather is warming now. While the lake ice is softening, it's not so thin that pushing someone could shatter it." I pointed at the circular hole in the ice, my gaze growing colder. "Moreover, that hole is far too small. Had I pushed Lin Yuqing in, the broken ice would have been a large expanse, not a tiny circular hole. Only if she stepped onto the ice herself and stomped down hard would it look like this." As my words fell, Lin Yuqing, standing nearby, instantly dropped the slight smile that had played on her lips. She tugged at Wei Yao's sleeve in panic. "Your Highness, it's not like that." Wei Yao froze for a moment, then stared intently at the ice, deep in thought. When he lowered his eyes to look at Lin Yuqing again, his gaze held a new, darker edge. Lin Yuqing felt uneasy under that intensely scrutinizing gaze. To divert his attention, she pretended to panic and fumbled at her sleeve. "Your Highness. The jade hairpin you gave Qing'er is missing." "What hairpin?" "The one engraved with plum blossoms." As she met Wei Yao's slightly guilty gaze, my mind went blank in an instant. Then it suddenly struck me, a year ago, during the Lantern Festival, Wei Yao had solved all the riddles for me to win first place, just to make me happy. Back then, I thought he was fond of me, so I gave him the jade hairpin engraved with plum blossoms, a keepsake my mother had left me before her passing, as a token of friendship. His ears had flushed crimson as he accepted it with trembling hands. Yet I never imagined he would later give this memento, my mother's final gift, to Lin Yuqing to win her favor. Before I could reclaim it, he had already presented it to her. My eyes burned with fury as I glared at Wei Yao, my knuckles cracking from the force of my grip. Shameful! Without a moment's hesitation, I plunged into the icy lake. The winter water was bone-chilling. Finally finding the jade hairpin sunk to the bottom, I began swimming toward shore. Exhausted, I choked on several mouthfuls of water before slowly sinking back down. As consciousness faded, I saw two figures, one dark, one purple, jump in after me. When I opened my eyes again, I was in the Imperial Medical Institute. Upon seeing me awake, Wei Yao joyfully grasped my hand. "Sure Yao, you're finally awake." But as I focused on his face, a wave of disgust washed over me. I wrenched my hand free from his grasp. Wei Yao lowered his eyes, his lips pressed together, his dark eyes deep and unreadable. "What happened that day was my fault. I wronged you." But Qing'er was driven by such insecurity. "Your family background far surpasses hers. She feared that after we married, you would overshadow her, which is why she resorted to such desperate measures. For my sake, could you please not hold it against her?" I frowned, my eyes brimming with disgust. Before I could speak, he continued unprompted, "His Majesty's decree will arrive tomorrow. Qing'er and I have discussed it. Once you both enter the household, you shall be equal, one as the principal wife, the other as a secondary wife. Neither will be ranked above the other, and you shall manage the household together. What do you say?" I propped myself up on the bed, staring at him with utter bewilderment. "When did I ever say I'd marry you?" Wei Yao rubbed his temples in exasperation. "Stop this unreasonable tantrum. You're still playing games with me. Elevating you to secondary wife is the greatest concession I can make. What more could you possibly want?" I scoffed inwardly. Unsatisfied? In my past life, 10 years of marriage ended with him committing suicide for me, leaving behind a widow and orphan, struggling to survive in the chaos of war. And now he dares ask what I find unsatisfactory? My eyes filled with sorrow as I suppressed 1,000 regrets. "I'll say it again, I will not marry you." His face darkened with fury as he rose, furrowing his brow. He stormed out, flinging his sleeves behind him, leaving only a parting shot. "When the Emperor's decree of marriage arrives tomorrow, you won't be so defiant." After Wei Yao departed, a dark figure leapt through the window. Xiaosei stood by my bed, his gaze heavy and cold. "Do you still harbor feelings for that scum?" I shook my head. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw blood trickling from his clenched fingers and gasped. "How did you get hurt?" Xiaosei awkwardly hid his hand behind his back. "It's nothing, just a minor injury." He lifted his head to look at me again, his lips moving. "You still haven't answered my question." I looked at him and spoke softly, "You'll know my answer tomorrow." Xiaosei's brow twitched, and he murmured, "I'm sorry. I failed to protect you." Half his figure stood bathed in spring light, half hidden beneath the corridor's shadow. His downcast eyes held a trace of remorse. Suddenly, I recalled the previous life. When he found my corpse, his eyes were filled with wounds, and he had spoken those same words, brimming with endless regret. I failed to protect you." It was only after becoming a ghost that I learned the boy I'd rescued from a pile of beggars as a child was actually the prince of the Li dynasty. And later, the falcon who single-handedly ended the chaos and unified the 9 provinces. After he buried me in the tomb, he came to speak with me every day. But in truth, he only repeated a few words. "Yuan, it was my failure. If only I could have acted faster, ended it all sooner. You wouldn't have been killed by that scum." The last time I saw him was in the depths of winter. By then, the realm was pacified, rivers clear and seas tranquil. He had abdicated in favor of an outstanding younger relative of the imperial clan. Dressed in bright red ceremonial robes, he took his own life before my tomb. Only then did I hear it, the deafening, earth-shaking love he'd carried from 13 to 32. As my thoughts returned, I hooked my finger around his hand, my eyes stinging. "It's not your fault. I was the one who wouldn't listen. In my past life, after you tried every way to stop me, I still insisted on marrying someone who didn't love me." Xiaosei stroked my head, his eyes suddenly reddening. "Silly." In that moment, I suddenly felt that Xiaosei understood the 1,000 unspoken words in my heart. The next day, Wei Yao arrived at the general's residence alongside Li Gonggong, the eunuch attending the emperor. He wore an expression of eager anticipation, as if he couldn't wait to witness the emperor bestowing our marriage decree. When our eyes met, he gave me a smug, confident smirk. I scoffed. Turning my head, I caught sight of Xiaoxie nearby, a thin sheen of sweat glistening on his nose from nervousness. Only when Eunuch Li opened the imperial edict and began reading did the tension break. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees, I have heard that within the general's residence there is a guard named Xiaoxie, who excels in both literary and martial arts, rivaling the finest talents of noble families. I have also heard that General Chen's daughter and he are deeply in love. Therefore, I hereby bestow upon them a marriage. May you walk hand in hand through the rest of your lives, treating each other with respect and reverence, growing old together. When Eunuch Li finished, Wei Yao froze for a moment before snatching the imperial edict, its bright yellow paper gleaming, from Eunuch Li's hands in disbelief. How is this possible? How could His Majesty bestow a marriage decree upon a mere guard? He checked it repeatedly, his expression slowly cracking like a fissure. Then, glaring at me, he roared with fury, "Qin Shi Yuan. You'd rather marry a lowly guard than this prince." I lifted my lips in a non-committal curl. "Your Highness, I never said I would marry you. From the very beginning, Shi Yuan has only ever wanted to marry one person." I turned my head to look at Xiaoxie beside me, nudging closer to his side. When our eyes met, his eyelids fluttered heavily, and his slender, long fingers tightened inside his sleeves. He looked as if he were struggling to restrain himself. Wei Yao's eyes were cold and sharp, his clear voice strained with suppressed anger. "Qin Shi Yuan, have you ever even considered marrying this prince?" My reply was blunt, never. He closed his eyes slightly, his breathing momentarily uneven. Yet fury made the veins on his forehead bulge violently as he lunged several steps toward me. Just as Wei Yao closed to within a step, a cold blade flashed before his chest. Xiaoxie lifted his eyes, narrowing his dark, pool-like gaze. "If your Highness dares take another step toward my fiancé, do not blame my sword for having no eyes." Perhaps the word fiancé struck a nerve. Wei Yao's eyes suddenly flushed crimson, yet they held a chilling, piercing glare. "And who the hell are you?" With tensions at a breaking point, I swiftly pulled the two apart. Xiaoxie's current status was delicate, Wei Yao must not grow suspicious. His Royal Highness the Prince of Duan's wedding is imminent. It would be inappropriate for you to remain at the general's residence. Sure, Yao won't see you off. You may go as you please. His voice suddenly rose, trembling. "You're kicking me out? You're actually kicking me out for a lowly guard?" I frowned. "He's no mere guard. He is my future husband." Wei Yao froze, his gaze settling on the hands of Xiaoxie and mine, clasped together. In his dark pupils, I saw resentment, disappointment, and an indescribable complexity. "Qin Shi Yuan, don't you dare regret this. In your past life, you..." As if realizing something, he abruptly fell silent, storming off with a furious flick of his sleeve. I knew the unspoken words. That in my past life, I had begged to marry him. But that was all in the past. At least this time, I would keep my eyes wide open. After Wei Yao left, I turned to look at Xiaoxie beside me. He hung his head, lost in thought. Despite my repeated calls, he offered no response. My patience snapped. I leapt up, smacked the back of his head hard, and yanked his ear, shouting, "Snap out of it." Xiaoxie jolted awake, his chest heaving visibly. When our eyes met, a flush instantly spread across his cheeks, climbing swiftly to his ears. I froze in place. Xiaoxie was usually taciturn, his expression perpetually stern. I'd never seen him look so captivatingly alluring. The atmosphere grew suddenly charged. I awkwardly rubbed my nose and lowered my head. "You." Before I could finish with "What's wrong?" a sudden icy chill touched my lips. My eyes widened in shock, seeing only the youth's exquisitely handsome face looming closer. His starry eyes shone brightly beneath long lashes, his voice soft and lingering. "Call me husband again." My face flushed, and I obediently murmured, "Husband." The afterglow of the setting sun bathed him, the subtle blush on his cheeks appearing even more bashful in the light. He lowered his eyes, watching me intently, then bent closer. A scent mingled with the cold pine drifted to my nose. My heart tightened, and I instinctively closed my eyes. After a long moment, the expected blush-inducing scene never materialized. When I opened my eyes in bewilderment, he was already gone. Only the figure of a youth leaping onto the eaves remained, his robes fluttering as he vanished into the golden glow. Recently, envoys from the court had visited the palace, and the emperor hosted a banquet in their honor. The male relatives of officials discussed diplomatic matters within the inner court. The female relatives gathered in the outer hall, sipping tea and chatting idly. "Yuqing, we envy you so much. Prince Duan is deeply devoted to you. I hear he personally hunted a pair of wild geese to present as a betrothal gift." Lin Yuqing lowered her head bashfully, yet her eyes drifted involuntarily toward me. "Sister Xuan's marriage is equally enviable." Someone chimed in beside her. "Enviable? She married some lowly palace guard. She's brought shame upon us noble ladies of the capital." Lin Yuqing curved her lips. After all, it was a marriage personally bestowed by His Majesty. TSK. Everyone knows Qin Xuan was defiled by bandits. Her father had to beg the emperor for an imperial decree using his military merits just to save her face from hitting the ground. Amidst the chattering, I picked up the still-steaming teacup from the table and strode forward, flinging its contents over the heads of those whispering gossips. "Ladies, after all that talk, you must be parched. Here, quench your thirst with some tea." Lin Yuqing wiped the tea from her face and shouted, flustered, "Qin Xuan, you audacious." The group who had been fawning over her earlier, not wanting to get involved, wisely backed away. I slapped her hard across the face. "What kind of creature are you, daring to question an engagement personally bestowed by His Majesty? Have you grown tired of living?" A red, swollen handprint instantly appeared on her cheek. She seemed poised to argue back. But then, as if realizing her own fault, she opened her mouth only to close it again. When she looked up, her gaze was venomous, like a snake's. "Qin Shiyun, don't gloat too soon. Even if your birth is slightly nobler than mine, I will one day be the revered princess consort of Prince Duan. How could you, the wife of a lowly guard, ever compare to me?" I scoffed sarcastically. "I'm not as idle as you, spending all day comparing myself to others." After the banquet ended, the carriage from the general's residence was late in arriving. After a long while, the coachman brought only a horse, explaining the carriage's wheel had broken and I'd have to wait longer. Seeing me standing alone at the palace gate, Wei Yao offered, "Shall this prince escort you home?" He raised his eyes to signal the coachman nearby to pull the carriage to a halt before me. Lin Yuqing, standing beside him, suddenly darkened her expression, though it shifted back to an innocent look in an instant. "Your Highness, father and I agreed you'd escort me home today. Qing'er wants to ride in the carriage too." Her voice was as light as the wind rustling through treetops. Yet Wei Yao frowned uncharacteristically, his tone tinged with reproach. "That carriage is so large, can it only seat one person? How big is your behind?" Hearing this, her face flushed alternately crimson and purple. I glanced at the two of them, then stepped into the stirrup, swung myself onto the horse, cracked the whip, and rode off without looking back. Wei Yao stared at my retreating silhouette, frozen in place for a long while. Late spring approached, yet the crown prince's wedding, though clearly imminent, was repeatedly delayed. This greatly displeased the emperor. As the Empress Dowager's birthday drew near, nobles and aristocrats flocked to the palace to offer congratulations. At the banquet, Wei Yao's gaze coiled around me like a venomous snake, clinging to me like maggots on bone. His stare made me uneasy. Seizing a moment, I slipped away to the rear garden for some air. Barely a few steps later, I turned and collided with him. He had followed. Wei Yao's brow furrowed slightly, his voice tinged with reproach. "How long do you intend to hide from this prince?" I wanted no further entanglement with him and turned to leave, only to have him seize my wrist. "What do you think you're doing?" His jawline tensed abruptly, a sharp, icy glint flashing in his eyes. "Break off the engagement. I demand you end your engagement with that lowly guard." His air of entitlement made me laugh bitterly. "On what grounds?" Wei Yao pressed his lips together tightly. He cupped my face, his icy fingertips tracing my cheekbone with deliberate slowness. On the grounds that I am the crown prince, second only to the emperor, while he is merely a powerless, insignificant guard. Crushing him would be as easy as crushing an ant. My expression turned cold. You dare! If I kill him, what will you do? I swiftly pulled the silver hairpin from the back of my head and pressed it against his neck, enunciating each word clearly. I will kill you too. Wei Yao froze, suddenly drained of strength. His hand fell limp at his side. His eyes fixed on mine, slightly reddened, a mix of defiance and despair. Even his usually haughty voice now sounded hoarse. Qin Shiyuan, you're a liar. Didn't you once say you loved only me, that you'd marry no one but me? I let out a light laugh, yet my eyes filled with sorrow. It lasted only a moment before settling into calm. Yes, there was a time when you were the only one in my heart and eyes. But how did you treat me? I demanded hoarsely. You watched me being humiliated by that bandit and did nothing to save me. You knew I was framed by Lin Yuqing, yet you still chose to side with her. Wei Yao, our bond has long since ended. The last words escaped my lips so softly they seemed to dissolve in the wind. It was rare to see Wei Yao's face so utterly blank. For a moment, he looked flustered, reaching out to grab my hand. Sure Yao, do you remember? We were husband and wife in a past life. We even conceived a child together. He looked just like you. I wrenched my hand free, my entire body trembling uncontrollably. I roared at him, you have no right to speak my Qian's name. Wei Yao froze, like a broken, half-collapsed head stuck in place. Then, as if awakening from a deep dream, his pupils contracted. So, you knew all along. Yes, I know everything. My eyes were unfocused, unable to conceal the sorrow within. Wei Yao, do you know how Qian died? Wei Yao staggered back a step. No. He was my child. How could he be dead? After you left with Lin Yuqing, the Prince of Duan's mansion collapsed overnight. I fled south with your mother from the temple in Qian, only to be ambushed by northbound bandits who plundered all our possessions. One bandit coveted the iron-forged wrist guards you'd given Qian. The boy refused to let go, even in death. In the end, he was stabbed through the stomach. Tears blurred my vision as I clenched my fists tightly, suppressing the piercing agony within. Wei Yao's face instantly turned as pale as paper, frozen in place as if struck by lightning. He repeated the same words over and over, no. It can't be. After that day, Wei Yao seemed deeply shaken and didn't bother me for a long time. Meanwhile, the general's residence was busily preparing for my marriage to Xiao Se. The day before the wedding, Xiao Se and I knelt before the ancestral hall, offering incense and burning paper offerings for my mother. A gust of wind swept through the doorway, carrying a chill. The unconsumed flames in the basin danced wildly before quickly dying down. For some reason, a vague sense of foreboding rose within me. Instinctively, I grasped Xiao Se's hand beside me. Xiao Se, our wedding tomorrow will go smoothly, won't it? He clasped my hand in return, soothingly reassuring me. Yuan, don't worry. I'll handle everything. I nodded. Yet that shadow of worry in my heart refused to lift. Lately, Xiao Se had vanished for days at a time, returning each time covered in wounds. I knew he was doing what he had to do. Yet I couldn't help but worry. Then came the day of our wedding. The Prince of Duan's troops poured in like a flood, surrounding the entire general's mansion so tightly not a soul could escape. I stood in the center, dressed in a deep crimson wedding gown. The steward rushed in, panic etched on his face. Miss, it's terrible. The general and the groom are both missing. How could this be happening? In my past life, Wei Yao had plotted rebellion precisely to wrest Lin Yuqing from the emperor's grasp. Now that he'd finally married his beloved, why commit such a crime deserving of extermination of his entire clan? My heart sank, and I forced myself to remain calm. Uncle Zhang, take a squad of guards and escort the women and children out through the secret passage. But what about you? Don't worry about me. Prince Duan came for me. He won't harm me. I urged him to depart. Hurry. Don't waste any time. Shortly after Uncle Zhang left with his men, the general's mansion gates were smashed open from the outside by soldiers. Wei Yao, clad in a deep crimson wedding robe, strode toward me with measured steps, his eyes glinting with a hint of madness. "Ian, I have come to claim you as my bride." I froze for a moment before responding coldly, "Where are my father and Xiao Se?" He curved his lips in a gentle smile, yet the warmth didn't reach his eyes. "After we're married, you'll learn their whereabouts." Meeting his sinister gaze, I drew a deep breath. "You're openly abducting an imperial minister. Wei Yao, do you even know what you're doing?" He lifted my chin with a single finger, his eyes fixed on me with piercing intensity. Yet his words were light as a feather. "Rebellion, Yuan. Don't you understand?" I stumbled back 2 steps, crashing heavily against the pillar behind me. "You're mad." Seemingly delighted by my panic, Wei Yao smiled with satisfaction and pulled me forcefully into his embrace. His cold, persistent scent seeped into me bit by bit, like an impenetrable net wrapping me layer by layer, threatening to swallow me whole. In the 13th year of the Northern Wei dynasty, Prince Duan allied with remnants of the previous dynasty and launched a palace coup under the pretext of cleansing the court of corrupt officials. The emperor, along with a group of ministers and his relatives, were placed under house arrest within the imperial palace. I, however, was imprisoned within Prince Duan's mansion. On the 3rd day, Lin Yuqing, disguised as a maid, slipped into the room where I was held captive, carrying a food box. When I spotted her, she drew a dagger from beneath her sleeve and lunged straight at me. I dodged just in time, seizing her wrist and wrenching it backward. A crack echoed as the dagger fell to the floor. Lin Yuqing collapsed awkwardly, wailing in agony. I looked down at her from above. "I've never wronged you. We merely had a few words earlier. Why did you try to kill me?" She raised her head, her eyes now bloodshot. "Do you know? After everything was settled, the Prince of Duan was going to make you his empress." "Why?" "He was the one who promised to marry me, yet he was also the one who abandoned me first." Her eyes bulged as she snarled at me, "It's all because of you. You stole everything that was mine. If not for you, I would have become the Prince of Duan's consort long ago, destined to be the revered empress." I frowned, feeling utterly baffled. "You should be asking Wei Yao these questions, not me," I said calmly. "Leave." She lowered her eyes, stumbling to her feet, her expression unreadable. But just as she reached the doorway, she abruptly turned back. Before I could react, she swiftly picked up the dagger from the floor and plunged it into my abdomen without hesitation. Her face twisted into a hideous grimace. "Qin Shiyuan, go to hell. When you die, the prince's heart will return." I coughed up a mouthful of blood, my eyes widening in disbelief. In that critical moment, the door burst open with a kick. Wei Yao stood in the doorway, radiating a chill. Finally, amidst Lin Yuqing's panicked expression, he drew the sword at his side and thrust it into her back without hesitation. The blade entered white, emerged red. Lin Yuqing collapsed heavily to the floor, her eyes still wide with defiance as she stared toward Wei Yao and me in her final moments. Are you okay?" Wei Yao rushed forward, his face etched with concern. I glanced at Lin Yuqing lying motionless on the floor, her eyes still open, then looked at Wei Yao before me. The cold wind pouring in through the door felt like sharp blades cutting into my skin. So this was it, the man I'd spent over a decade married to in my previous life. I had never truly understood Wei Yao. He was far more treacherous and heartless than I'd ever imagined, colder and more ruthless. Clutching my bleeding abdomen, I stumbled back several steps, staring at him in terror. "Don't come any closer." Wei Yao froze in place, his entire body taut like a stretched bowstring. It seemed any word from me could snap him clean in two. Tears glistened in the corners of his eyes. His voice came out hoarse, like torn brocade. "Yuan, I beg you. Don't look at me like that." Wei Yao had specifically ordered the Prince of Duan's mansion to be prepared. The situation was tense now, panic gripping the city. Citizens stayed locked indoors. Only the biting wind swept through the deserted streets. Yet before the mansion gates, the sound of Swana horns played incessantly. Scarlet lanterns hung high. An eerie atmosphere hung in the air. The maids dressed me as a bride-to-be. Staring at my own sorrowful reflection in the bronze mirror, a wave of desolation washed over me. Father and Xiao Se were now missing. The emperor was imprisoned within the palace walls, and I was being forced to marry Wei Yao. On the wedding day, Wei Yao took my hand, guiding me step by step into the bridal chamber he had prepared long ago. Yuan, what I owe you in Qian from my past life, I will repay in full. Once all is settled, I shall make you the most honored woman in this world. I yanked my hand away forcefully, only for him to grip it tighter. Stop this. Today is our wedding day. Save your strength. You'll have plenty of time to struggle when we consummate the marriage later. I lowered my head and bit his hand with fury. Don't even think about it. I will never marry you. The heavy taste of blood spread in my mouth. Wei Yao stared at his blood-soaked hand, still refusing to release mine. Instead, he let out a sinister chuckle. Yi's bite marks are rather adorable. The sham's melody rose as Wei Yao personally placed the red veil over my head. He then had the guards beside him pin me down as we bowed to heaven and earth in the ancestral hall. As night fell, a freshly bathed Wei Yao gently pushed open my chamber door. I huddled in the corner, clutching the silver hairpin tightly within my sleeve. The dusk was thick, fine snow sparking against the lattice window. Wei Yao glanced outside and murmured softly, "Yao, it's snowing again." I remained silent, watching him warily. Just as he paused, an arrow pierced the window, embedding itself in the pillar behind him. Instantly, the dim courtyard erupted in flashes of torchlight. Wei Yao's expression changed. He swiftly propped open the window and bent to peer outside. Xiao Sei. How could it be? Wasn't he locked in the dungeon? Hearing Xiao Sei's name, my brow furrowed. I rushed forward urgently. Through the window's crack, I caught sight of Xiao Sei seated atop a horse, clad in silver light armor. Standing side by side with him was none other than my father. I exhaled softly in relief. So, they were both safe and sound. A soldier rushed in with news, "Your Highness, it's terrible." The guards assigned to watch Xiao Sei and General Chen were actually double agents planted long ago to aid their escape. Both men fled at dawn. The prisoners in the dungeon now are imposters. Wei Yao's face darkened. He kicked the young soldier hard, sending him sprawling. Useless! The soldier scrambled up in panic. The palace. Wei Yao gritted his teeth. What about the palace? Wei Zhan, who had been bedridden, suddenly emerged with tens of thousands of palace guards lying in ambush. He's wiped out our entire garrison stationed there. Now even the Li dynasty has dispatched 30,000 elite troops to aid Wei Zhan. We won't hold out much longer. Wei Yao crushed a teacup in fury, his voice thick with disbelief. How could the Li dynasty meddle in Wei's affairs? Suddenly, as if struck by a thought, he turned and shot me a chilling glance. Xiao Sei. It must be that Xiao Sei. I suspected his identity wasn't that of an ordinary guard from the start, and now he's outmaneuvered me again. I let out a cold laugh. Wei Yao, have you never wondered why this rebellion of yours has proceeded so smoothly? He gritted his teeth and closed his eyes heavily. You knew all along? I remained silent, but the answer was clear. Though I didn't know the full extent of Father and Xiao Sei's plans, I chose to trust them. Moonlight quietly spilled across the window lattice. Outside, flames lit the sky. Inside, the room was deathly quiet. Wei Yao lifted his head to look at me, his voice tinged with self-mockery. Go. I won't force you. I slowly closed my eyes. When I opened them again, only a lifeless, ashen emptiness remained. In your past life, you harbored rebellion for Lin Qingyu's sake. Yet you never imagined she would die young from illness. After following her into a crippled existence, your imperial brother soon uncovered evidence of your factional intrigues. On the day the general's residence was raided and its entire household executed, I discovered the blank imperial edict left for you by the sacred ancestor in your study. Only that saved the lives of hundreds within the general's household, and your mother, the Empress Dowager, who spent half her life in a temple, surrounded by ancient Buddhas and dim lamps. Wei Yao, when you left for Lin Yuqing that day, did you ever consider how Qian and I would survive? Wei Yao looked up in shock, tears streaming down his cheeks. He staggered backward several steps, knocking over the candlestick behind him. Slowly, he closed his eyes. His lips, pale as paper, pressed into a tight line, as if enduring immense agony. Yuan, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. The flames spread through the windows. He stood alone in the firelight, utterly still. As the flames intensified, Xiaosei rushed in, frantically checking me over from head to toe. The figure before me suddenly burst into laughter. Tears streamed down his face as he laughed. Yuan, you look truly beautiful in your wedding attire. In this lifetime, you have finally married me once. I have no regrets. With that, he resolutely stepped into the flames. With Wei Kingdom's support, Xiaosei finally overthrew his imperial brother who had relentlessly hunted him, securing the position of crown prince. With Wei's rebellion quelled, the capital streets bustled with life once more. Father voluntarily surrendered his military authority, determined to return to mother's homeland. The wheels of history rolled relentlessly forward, and the unification of the 9 provinces became an unstoppable trend. In this lifetime, due to Xiaosei's early ascension, the war lasted only a single year before ending. Just as in the previous life, once peace was restored, Xiaosei passed the throne to an outstanding descendant of the imperial clan. The day Xiaosei abdicated reminded me of a certain night in my past life. He stood beneath the snow-laden eaves, watching silently as I boarded the carriage bound for the Prince of Duan's residence. As I departed, I glanced back at him. The youth's eyes held neither sorrow nor joy, yet the knuckles of his clenched fist were stained with blood. A slow trickle flowed down his palm, falling onto the snow beneath his feet and blooming into one crimson flower after another. After that, he fearlessly charged through every muddy path ahead, striving with all his might to reach the highest peak. All to protect the one he cherished for a single journey. Yet the sky was vast and the road long, the yellow sands stretching endlessly. When we met again, a river of the underworld lay between us. But thankfully, in this life, we would never again fail to meet. He said, Yuan, this lifetime, I came solely for you. I thought before that even if you chose someone else this time, it wouldn't matter, because I would take you back with my own hands. I laughed and threw myself into his arms, and what happened? Well, my little miss who mistook fish eyes for pearls suddenly came to her senses. The end.